strategy is set, which is basically what I'm going to talk through, then that message gets transmitted to everybody. Differently for a fundraiser than for a citizen of your country, but that is a singular message that's repeated over and over and over again, and we're going to get to that. So this is about issue communications, advocacy, and also fundraising too. You are in a unique situation in your country, and globally, I must admit, most of my work is done in the United States, so I caveat that now, but I have worked in many countries around the world. But what you see here is something we all are living in. We are at a moment of extraordinary change. We're facing challenges that we never have faced before. Climate, technology, etc., division and hatred on opposite sides of political parties that we have seen sometimes in the past, but it is so deep and divisive right now, it's very difficult to communicate in an environment like that. So, now, that's the bad news. I think there's still things to do. And I believe that First Ladies actually have a unique position in order to overcome some of that division. And we can talk about that too. But you see all these issues here that we're dealing with. My proposition is to be very focused on what I am talking about, and it is an effort to influence policy or behavior. That's what communication should do. It's not just some, nice-looking advertisement or billboard or speech. It has a strategic purpose. You'll hear me say strategy many times today. To influence policy and behavior, it could be changing laws, it could be changing budgets, it could be changing corporate policy. Some of you have done that internationally with your with the NGO work that you've done. That's incredibly impressive. It could be focused on personal attitudes of voters and citizens to create a movement. And that then requires every tool in our toolbox of persuasion and communication, from you and your language and speech and stature and reputation to others in the country, to advertising and billboards and social media and digital and all of it that we would want to integrate into a complete campaign. That's what this is about. And there's three elements to this thinking, and each of these are critical for success. One, of course, is policy. What is the idea? What's the intervention that you are going to propose, that you believe that the country should adopt, perhaps through legislation or through the civil sector or something like that? That's policy. What is the idea? Second, of course, is politics. And I mean politics the way you understand it from a sophisticated perspective. Understanding what will move legislators. Not something that sounds good that isn't going to matter. You know what it's like to fight in legislative battles and in your parliaments. That's what I'm talking about politics, and to be very, very candid about that, about what's a good idea politically and what's not a good idea politically. It may be a great idea, but if it doesn't fly politically, it really may not ever see the light of day. And then, of course, communications and marketing. Whoops. I got tied up in the plant. And then communications and marketing. And you'll hear each of these legs of this stool, as I say, reflected today. In your handout, after my presentation, this is in the presentation, and if there is one thing, if you take one thing from this session, Again, I know you're tired, it's been a couple days, you've had people like me talking to you. This is the strategic process to follow to get to an effective communications, advocacy, fundraising program. And that's what I want to talk through. It begins by being quite clear about what our goal is. What do you want to do? Almost the most important element of this is that first step. What does success look like? And be very specific about it. We will look at over 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. You want to create impact. You want to have substantial impact. I've seen what you've done, HIV, TB, child abuse, gender equality, etc., etc. How can you have that program create impact over a period of time and be specific about it? We are going to have 50% more of our young girls graduate from high school. Something like that. We are going to provide vaccines to 75% of our population in 10 years.
And Rob, this is just to highlight, so this is going back to what we talked about with vision, that very big overarching long-term goal, and then the mission gets into some of that stress. So we started this.
Yes.
So just see this as a continuation of what we began on Monday in terms of setting your vision and course, and then coming up with a plan that you implement. So this is perfect.
Yeah. So we haven't talked about communications yet at all, but we need to know what that is and to be very clear about it, you and your team, to cross-examine each other on that, say, really, is that what we want? You know, go through that. Audit and research. Audit and research. It is what you all do, some of you as professionals, as medical doctors, as, former executives at the World Bank. You know what the strategic process is. You need to gather the evidence. And what I really mean by this is primarily understand the lives of the people that you have to move. If you are trying to get people to vote for a program, if you are trying to get people to get a vaccine, if you are trying to get people to adopt a healthy behavior, you need to understand their lives. Now, I understand that you understand your the citizens of your country's lives. But what we do often is go through a 24-hour clock. They wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. What do they do? What do they do? They might, these days, check their phones. Forget that for a second. What do? Do they have to, somewhere in there, there's children. What's their process for that? They get their children awake. There's breakfast. There's work. There's what's the family do? Where could this behavior come into play? How could you affect their lives? Who do they listen to? If they're on their phone, who are they reading? Who's influencing them, right? 24 hours, through their day, through their work, through their leisure time, through their, in the evening, through their family time, through dinner, and then they go to bed at night. That's who you want to understand very clearly. You want to understand the competitors, if you will. Who else is out there? Who else? There may be an NGO that's doing this work. There may be another nonprofit in your country that's doing this work. How does your program fall into this environment, right? There no doubt is, as I say here, secondary research, existing research into the problem, into the audience, that maybe international polling organizations have done, Pew or Ipsos or things like that, that maybe organizations in your country have done this. What do parents think about educating their young girls? What do we know about that? Has anybody done that research? Has anybody talked to them, their parents? Is that and I'll get to this when I talk about the work we did for Michelle Obama, it's probably, when you're talking about children, it's still probably very much the woman's role to make those decisions, right? So what does that mean? What's the mom's point of view about how to educate their child, how to maybe get them on a healthier diet or exercise or things like that? You want to understand as much as you can. And then finally here, primary research. Primary research is actually going out. You've heard this many times. You've probably seen some of these yourselves. You might have been asked, focus groups might have asked about you or your spouse, certainly, in focus groups. What do you think? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What do you like about them? Do you think this is a program that this person could adopt? What do you worry about? What do you know about them? Did you know that they are a medical doctor? No, I did not know that. Well, that might be impressive, you know, so that you have standing to maybe communicate more effectively. So research is critical, and then we will use that research to go into strategy. Right? So we have learned about everything that we need to know. This, by the way, is the slide I'm going to spend the most time on. And then we look at strategy. What's our roadmap for reaching the goal that we defined up above? How are we going to move there? And I have some tools here later I'll take you through. Who is our audience? We thought it would be we could motivate young women, but you know what? They're not open to this message. We need to communicate to their family members. Maybe that's something that we can communicate to, or whatever the situation might be. But you want to be clear about who you want to move. Then you get into the message, the so-called message. We'll talk about that. The messenger. Is frankly, being very candid about it, are you the best person to deliver this message? Or might some other people be the best person to deliver this message? You want to be very clear-eyed about this and understand what the best way to reach this goal is. And then finally, the policy. Do you need to tweak the policy a little bit based on some of the lessons that we've learned in research? And then, only then, do we get to the creative. One of the biggest things that I see in the 35 years I've been doing this is people say, oh, let's talk about communications, and they start to draw up an ad. They start to say, well, wait, what if we had this? And people, you know, there's a family here, and they're, you know, looking at their breakfast table or something. Like, why are you doing it? I don't know why you're doing it. Is it a family? Is it not a family? Is it a breakfast table, or is it something else? People make judgments about executional things when they have not done the strategy at all. Then we'll put a marketing plan together, all the media I talked about, and then the execution, that is getting this out into the world, which I have a sheet to show you that. And then we will monitor and measure and refine it based on how it is actually working in the real world. So, this is in your book, and it is really, I believe, one of the most important things that you can take away from this. The next slide, since so much of the work that you do, I thought I would bring this out, which is very quickly some of the principles of public health communications. Yes?
I would say it's not just public health, right?
Yes.
It's sort of like social change, communications around.
Yes, correct. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yes. Absolutely. It derives from some of the best practitioners of public health, and we've lived through how difficult it is to communicate during COVID. But here are a couple of these lessons. One is simple and clear. A single overriding communications outcome. telling people what they can do and how they can act to keep themselves and others safe, for example. Very easy to follow. Wear a mask, get a vaccine, wash your hands. Credible and trustworthy. You need to have credibility and create that trust. Honest and transparent. We live in a world that changes rapidly. Situations on the ground will change. You don't know everything, and people don't expect you to necessarily know everything. You need to be honest about it. When things change, we will have to change things, change the way we're doing things. Repetition, repetition, repetition. One of the most difficult things for principals and leaders to get used to, because if I said the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, you'd think I lost my mind. But to a public, you need to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, because you can put, you can put the spin on the ball. You can put say it differently in different circumstances. But make no mistake about it, people do not wake up in the morning thinking, "What am I going to hear from the First Lady of my country today?" That's not how they think. So you need to engage them. Understanding your audience with empathy, their lives, how they live their lives. You're sophisticated political people, you understand what that is, but we always can use another dose of it. Crisis preparedness, you will need it. You will need it. Crises occur, and people are left flat-footed. And then these are the references there. So let me talk just a little bit about strategy. This quote here is very important. What I find often is people want to do too much. They, for a variety of internal pressures, it could be bureaucratic, it could be political, it could be maybe a lack of understanding of an audience. They will try to accomplish too much. And a strategy, this quote I love, strategy is choosing what not to do. There's a single-minded strategy. Other things are important. Those are things that you can get to. But strategy is the most important thing to get to, and we will talk about how we do this. This is an incredibly helpful chart and concept that we use all the time. What are the two most important emotions as human beings that we have, that motivate us? Hope and fear. We are hopeful about the future, we're hopeful about our children, we're hopeful about our own lives, and we are fearful about what could befall us, our kids, our country, etc. And so often what we're dealing with is a situation where citizens around the world are thinking, why can't things get better? Why can't my life get better? And they see other people prospering, could be around the world, could be in their country, and they haven't quite figured it out. The two most important axes that we see, I don't know if you can see this, but again, this is in your handout. On the horizontal axis, this says people like me, or over here, distrusted elites. This is perhaps the most important, maybe I don't need to explain this at all. This is one of the most important political questions that we ask in political research, which is, do you think the leader cares about people like me? Or they care about someone, they care about others. And you know in your heart what that means. Obviously, what we want to do is get over here in this side of this equation. caring about people like me, right? On the vertical axis is the axis of change, right? At the bottom says status quo, and at the top says change. On the lower left-hand side is where a lot of people live, unfortunately, which is, man, it seems like those elites are getting ahead, and there's no change in sight for my circumstances. Now, I'm being dramatic about it to make a point. And that's where the fearfulness comes in. What we want to do is move people up to the right-hand corner. And from a communication strategy point of view, to say both that your values and your policy and ideas are connected to real people. That communicates that you understand them, that you appreciate them, you have empathy for them, you know what their lives are when they wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. You know what they're thinking about. And when they go to bed at night. That's how much you know and care about those people. And if you don't feel like you know about it, then you have to find people who can help you understand that. And at the bottom right, and so this is the way that we move people from fear to hope, right? And you can align your policy ideas very specifically. How are we going to change and improve in the upper quadrant? And how are we going to connect to people who are ordinary, everyday people? This quote here is a favorite of mine from President Bill Clinton. He was asked once how to create a movement. And he said, well, people want to dream, but they don't have time to. So what we need to do, what a leader needs to do, is paint the dream for them and then show them a credible pathway to get it. So you could look at this in that context. Up here is the dream that ordinary people have, right? They want to just have some peace of mind. They want to be able to protect their children. They want to educate them. They want to stop violence and live in a violence-free situation. And somebody who cares about them will help them do that. I'm just going to touch on this because I've spent time on this earlier. This is the research I mentioned. Now, I'm sure all of you have seen sophisticated research, political surveys, probably marketing research in your other jobs that you've had. You understand what this is like. There's firms in your countries who do this. There's international firms. It is extraordinarily valuable to find professionals who can understand and go deep on who it is that you are trying to influence. And this really just lays out everything I talked about earlier. By the way, one thing to point out here is good research. If you're in a focus group, if this is our group of 10 or 12 people, and we're talking to them about their hopes and dreams, we can hear them. We can hear what she says and what you say, and but you also can say, now, what if you heard this message? What if the First Lady said this? And people, what do you think about that? Is that effective? Does that make sense? Do you trust her or him? What do you think about this message? What do you think about this message? What do you think about this idea? So you can try to plot a little bit in the future and see what the future might look like. You can also, by the way, ask about some potential criticism. Some people have said that this is a waste of resources, that we don't need to spend this money in this way as a country because whatever the situation is. So you can play this game out. You can think a couple steps down the chessboard if you'd like to. This is a tool that we use. This is in your handout. This is going to be something that I want to do when we break up into a breakout session. This is one thing we call a noble purpose. And this is from the longer term perspective of, let's say, you as a first lady, or the program that you are putting into place, right? This example is about British Airways. So forgive the corporate example. But this example has two threads. One is on the left-hand side, the brand truth, and on the right-hand side is the consumer truth. And what we want to do on one page, and it's very hard to do, is synthesize what we know about the consumer, or the voter, or the citizen on the right-hand side. And after months and months and months of research, it was found that people believed in, I don't know what that is, 7 or 8 words. International air travel is a brutal, dehumanizing experience. On the left-hand side, there was a brand truth about the British, which was, for a variety of reasons, and we might guess why, it's in the DNA of the British to travel well, right? And you pull those two things together, and the simple idea is British Airways is civilizing international air travel. Of course the British would do that, because we know that to be true about them. We're not trying to convince people about that. I have an exercise in your handout. We do this for programs, for social impact programs, for political campaigns. It's very hard to do because you have one page to do it. The second tool that we use is more timely, is more current. This one we used for Planned Parenthood. As you probably know, the international, but also very much, very large, most prominent reproductive health care advocacy and programmatic group in the United States. And there's a number of different elements here. Again, one thing is we start in the upper left-hand side with what we say the current state. Again, very hard to do because it's on one page. It's the current state. I think Planned Parenthood is important, but I don't have a reason to talk about it with friends. It's a very honest assessment of what the mindset is of the people that we're trying to influence. Then there's a social force that we want to look at, which is what's going on in society. What's happening around us? No judgment was the idea. The core defining value of a new generation, we were focusing on young people. No judgment. Live the life you want with all gender identity, racial tolerance, etc., so that you are oneself. On the right-hand side is where we want to move people. This gets to looking down the road a little bit. We want people to believe that Planned Parenthood embodies my values and is fighting for a future I believe in. The idea in the middle is the catalyst that gets you from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, which is always real, fighting for care and truth. Again, I will help you through this. We're going to do this in the breakout session. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but this is the level of detail that we would go into with a message. This is what we call a message box. This is a tool that we use. This is for the U.S. labor movement, for the reformers in the U.S. labor movement that have just taken power about 2 years ago. The idea is there's 4 quadrants, and the one in the middle is the central message, which is we are building a modern, dynamic, vibrant force of working people that will deliver good, sustainable jobs in the new economy. And the 4 things around it, obviously, are the details that we go into that. This is a process that we follow. That's a tool that you and your staff can use to go through the different elements of communications for a campaign. And then, of course, we put this on the calendar to go into detail as to how everything will unfold. Now, let me get to the case studies. The first one I want to talk about is our work for Michelle Obama and Let's Move. We worked for both Obama campaigns in 2008 and 2012. We were their youth agency, and we were brought in to develop the Let's Move program for the First Lady. The name did not exist. What she had said to us was, I wanted to tackle, she had heard and read and understood from her advisors that childhood obesity in the United States was above 30%. It's an epidemic. And in some states it's more than 50%. And what we knew was she was going to have a multiple government agency solution to this problem, to focus on reducing childhood obesity in American children. And our job was to develop and launch the program. Name it, brand it, message it, and develop the logo around it too. So the first thing we did research. We went and we talked to American mothers, because mothers are the ones that make the choices, for the most part, for children's exercise and the food in the home. So we talked to them about that. And we said, now this was the United States. We also learned about a program that the UK did a couple of years prior. It's a very similar sort of program. We found from talking to many mothers around the country that parents agree that increased weight is a problem and that it is unhealthy. They blamed it on the consequences of living in the modern world. Social media, both parents have to work now in a difficult economy. We don't have as much leisure time as we used to. I'm worried about my children just running out in the neighborhood and playing. You know, when I was a child, we used to ride our bikes around the neighborhood. I don't allow my children to do that anymore. It scares me. So we understood the context that this fell into. By the way, mothers don't want to hear that their child is obese. They may agree that they're overweight, but obesity is a negative word, and it's a judgment on American mothers. The most important part of it was they knew that this problem existed. They said, yeah, my child could become healthier, and I see their friends too. I see their friends in school, and I know it's a problem, and I know that that's not right. And then we said, well, who do you think should be responsible for helping fix it? Is that a role for the government? They said, no, not really, no, not really. And they basically came to the conclusion that was their responsibility. We are the mothers of these kids. And they all started to, you can imagine, they all started to encourage each other. Like, we can do this. We should do this. When I grew up, we were healthy and we moved around. So we took that research finding, we crystallized it into a creative direction, and we said it must be positive and inspiring, focusing on health and activity, give people agency. It needed to be a rallying cry. And then, and only then, we went to creative. And we developed a variety of different ideas. Let's Move was one of them. You see how we put this together as an option. We put Michelle Obama in front of it to understand that she was the one that was going to advocate for this. And we had a bunch of other different ideas that we exposed people to. We also wrote a message for Let's Move, but we had 5 or 6 other ones too. So we could test it, and we talked to people about it. Which do you like? Which don't you like? Why do you like this one? Why don't you like that one? What's that image, look, mean to you? And we got their reaction. Let's Move tested the best. People said, mothers said, we like it, it's motivating, we understand that it means, hey, let's do this together, but it also means let's get off the couch. They felt like they had agency, and most importantly, very relevant for you all, is they loved the idea that Michelle Obama was going to be leading this. They felt that she understood American mothers' lives. Even as she was now the wife of a president, they knew her story. They knew that she had 2 young kids. Her husband was working like crazy, wasn't home a lot. It was her responsibility to raise those kids. She knew what the hectic life was. And she had standing and authenticity to deliver this message. And her message was, let's move. Let's do this together. I'm not telling you what to do. Let's move. And it worked incredibly, incredibly well. And it actually made a dent in job release. The second thing, very quickly, I'm looking at the time, is Live Strong and the yellow band. You may remember this. We were hired to help that organization with branding. This is the tool that I said we used before, which is what's the current state from a consumer's point of view. I'm sure the Lance Armstrong Foundation is doing something good about cancer, but I don't know what it has to do with my life. Okay, good. They're working on cancer. Tell me why I should care about that. I don't. The desired state was the Lance Armstrong Foundation. By the way, it was not named Live Strong yet. Provides the tools and information people need to live their life on their terms. And so we found out that what people felt was, and I'm sure that some of you have dealt with this, either yourself or through loved ones, when you get a cancer diagnosis, you believe my world has completely changed. And I now am not in control. Something else is in control. The doctors are in control. I have to live on a schedule. I have to go to these appointments constantly. I am limited in what I can do. My life is dramatically different. And the idea was we would empower you. We would give you the tools to live life on your terms. Live strong. Knowledge is power, attitude is everything, and unity is strength, which of course means you're not alone, you're with other people. We turned that ethos into a message in yellow here, which to this day is on their wall in their foundation. Live Strong was so popular that it became the name of the organization. And they've sold a couple 100 million of these bands around the country. The last one, very quickly, is the designated driver idea. And I'm not going to go through this, but the one lesson I would say about this was in the United States. This was a program, a policy that was taken from Northern Europe. It never existed in the United States anymore, prior to this. It was taken from Northern Europe, and the idea simply was, we worry about drunken driving. There's a lot of people, a lot of Americans were getting killed by drunken driving. We have tried to tell people, don't drink and drive. And guess what? People are going to drink and drive. So what they did was, they broke down the problem into the component parts, and they said, how does this work? How does it work? Usually friends go out, they go to a party, they go to a bar, etc., and they're all drinking. And there was a lot of social research on this. How does that work? Etc. What they realized was, it's going to happen, so let's accept that. But what we can say is, one of you, don't worry, take a turn. Go out, have fun, but one of you is not right. And that was injected into television and movies by Hollywood writers and things like that. And it was adopted. It was adopted because people really felt, you know what, this is I have 3 adult kids now. Growing up, when they were younger, they do this. They do this. It was accepted. It was what we would call a social norm. And it was accepted in our culture. So it's an extraordinary idea, because what it was based on research, and it broke down what had been an intractable problem into a component. So that's my presentation, and now what I wanted to do was go to the 3 handouts in the book at the end. Oh, okay.
Tab 8. The last date is for Friday. You'll see these 3 pages, so there's strategic process, slide, and then there are these 2 diagrams. And this, so we're going to make this a combined communications and resource mobilization.
Yes, right. That's right.
And Gary and Rob will all be here sort of helping with breakout sessions. So
Yes.
if you want to get directions, then we'll support it whatever you're doing.
Yes. So the first page is just for you to have to follow, for your staff to go through this process. But as I said, it is critically important. These 2 slides, what I think would be very interesting would be to break up into pairs, 2 people, and use these tools for a program that you're considering, that is underway, that you'd like to do, and fill them out. These are brand strategy definitions. There's 2 different slides. Yeah. This, on 2 pages, the value of this is that it will force you to think very clearly and carefully about what your goals are, what the audience is, where you want to move them, what you stand for, but you'll have to obviously choose one of your programs that's either underway right now that maybe you think this could be valuable for, or something that you are considering. Yeah.
So one of the things one of the things to think about on this, and that's why I was glad that you also reviewed the research portion of the process, is because as we're thinking about not only trying to convey your message and your brand to the community, but when you're thinking about portraying it to donors, you will have evidence, you will have done the research, you will have had the conversations with the community, and you'll be backed up by the community because you've done that work. And so when you're putting this together, you're putting it together not just based on something you want, but on something you know the community needs and is aligned with your bigger vision. So you can choose something that you have already done research into, or you can use this as an opportunity to just practice something you may want to do, but you know you still need to research it, but it's still a great opportunity to go through that exercise.
Yeah. Well, so I think what we would do is maybe take 20 minutes or so to do this, and then we could come back and we could discuss them. And if one or two or three of you are open to sharing with the group about how you've done it, and we can discuss it and we can talk about it, because obviously it takes some time to, my experience, crystallize this into one page. But this is the purpose of this. It forces us to be very clear-minded about what we want to do.
And I'm thinking, can I get a show of hands? Would you like to go through this exercise in pairs, or would you like to go through this exercise with your team? Raise your hand if you'd like to go through this in pairs. In pairs? Okay, so together in pairs, and you can feel free to consult your team, or if you need any support from them, they're here. And we'll start with 20 minutes, but if you want to keep working on it, this opportunity to work on this is the most important. And so Gary and Rob and I will go around and support you. And if you want the whole hour to work on it, and we can share it some other time, that's fine. This is so crucial. And we're making up for a little bit of lost time. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
So let's start by just pairing up, and then we'll come around and make sure you feel like you understand the instructions.
Yes. It's up to you. If you have a program that you'd like to think about as you fill this out, maybe it's something that you're doing now or something that you'd like to do in the future. Maybe it's a consideration of something in the future, but it should be something specific. But I think it should be up to you to make it as helpful to you. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
But she's also invited ministers of Tories.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what you have been watching is day 3, which is the final day of the 2024 Global First Ladies Academy that Her Excellency Dr. Fatima Marabiou, the First Lady of the Republic of Sierra Leone, is currently participating at Ford Foundation, New York City, USA. Until the next time we go live, this is courtesy of the Strategic Communications Division, the Office of the First Lady, Republic of Sierra Leone.
Question about whether you're